This is Shelf Space. Today, I'm joined by Christine Couvelier, a CPG trendologist and a culinary expert who's been behind the scenes at Loblaws, Uniliver, and Maple Leaf Foods, and is someone who thinks about grocery aisles the way detectives might think about a crime scene. Okay, maybe I took that one a little too far. But we dig into what makes products stand out on shelves, why food leaders need to travel more, and how storytelling is reshaping the way that we shop. And before we get into it, I want to say a big thanks to our partners that make Shelf Space possible. Fasken, TD, Pacific Coast Distribution, Picnic Creative, Rima, and Benchmark 60. Okay, here's my conversation with Christine. This is it, Christine. You are my insider. You are my grocery insider. You're like a private detective, if you want to call it. I'm going to call you that. In grocery, I'm loving that we get to have this conversation. We've chatted a few times before, never with the record light on, so this will be really interesting. And I want to start you off with a question that I ask all my guests, and that is, if you were to look into the future, what's one innovation you would love to see in the grocery store?
Okay, firstly, I'm going to add private detective to my business card because I think that nobody's ever said that before, but that's cool. So as a very well-known global culinary trendologist, I do think about the future all the time. And I do spend a lot of time in grocery and gourmet stores. What would I like to see? I would like to see more products on the shelf, any category, where people have really done their homework. They've really paid attention to category and competitive analysis. They've really done a lot of external homework. They've really done the taste test. You know me, I'm all about taste. And we'll talk about all of that in more detail. But as overwhelming, I think we need to have a lot of foodpreneurs and existing food manufacturers take a step and sit and think. Have we done all we have? Have we used all of our resources? Have we called everybody we could, like me and you, to help them get the right thing on the shelf? Because we all know we get products home and we think, how did that get on the shelf when it costs the same or more amount of money potentially? And there it sits. So I'd really like that to be a wish. And we all know there are stars and there are things out there. And when we travel around the globe and go into grocery and gourmet stores, like I do, then, you do get those superstars and those wows. And oh, they got it. It makes my heart happy to be in this business. There's always something new and different coming tomorrow. It's always the what's possible. So let's think about how we can make it the best on the shelf for consumers.
Well, you make that sound so logical and so easy, but so many CPG founders, they feel like the homework that they need to do or that they're trying to do is to dive into the data, and they're looking at data and they're cramming data now into AI models to try to figure out what this data says faster. But is that point number one? And then there's other stuff after? Do you feel like sort of this analysis of the data needs to come a little later on in the journey of doing your best homework in the category?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been in this industry for decades and decades. I have steered and led some of the largest private label brands in the world and some of the largest food companies in the world and the most creative and innovative foodpreneurs in the world. And, and they all say, what's next? What's next? Hold, let's do some homework. So I say, start with know your target consumer. Who are you selling to? And how are you going to speak to them? Because you can't be beside every consumer in every gourmet and grocery store that carries your product line and watch them pick up or not pick up your product and put it in their grocery cart. So how are you going to have that product speak to them without you there? You have to know who they are. What do they like to eat? Where do they like to shop? What are in their cupboards? What are their palate choices? What do they like to cook? How do they like to cook? So many of the brands that I have helped over my career, I have done a lot of in-store education, but I've also done a lot of in-home education, taking my product development teams into consumers' homes, watching how they cook, watching how they eat, looking in their cupboards, looking in their fridges. So if you're launching a spicy salsa and you're launching it in Dallas, that level of spice is a whole different level because your target consumer is used to spicier food than if you're launching in Quebec City. So understanding your target consumer and laying that out, that has so much to do with all your next steps. I would then, number 2, I would really launch into a serious category and competitive analysis. And that's not just for you're making a pasta sauce, who else makes a pasta sauce? That's understanding so much about your category, your shelf, your refrigerator shelf, wherever you're going to be in a gourmet or grocery store. And a lot of people do call me to do those category and competitive analysis because you have to be very externally focused. And maybe as a CPG leader or maybe as a new foodpreneur, you're not thinking extremely category analysis and you're not thinking extremely externally focused. You're thinking, what is my company going to do? But when you think about a category and competitive analysis, let's take pasta sauce. And you're going to make a bolognese. Great. Who makes it best in the world? Is it a private label? Is it a brand name? Is it a Nona in Florence? Wherever it is, you have to know why that's considered the gold standard. There's a lot of reasons you can't for price and co-packer capability and minimum order quantity and all these other things that we know get on the list. But you have to know who the gold standard is. So you're shooting for that.
Well, if you were to bring a team into my kitchen, you would discover that I make a pretty good pasta sauce. Maybe not the best in the world, but the best in my home anyway. But what you would see is you would hear my wife talk about why we use sourdough pasta. You know, that Caslow sourdough pasta?
Absolutely.
She will go off for a few minutes and it's all comes back down to gut health and how our family's guts feel after a bowl of pasta. And when we eat sourdough pasta, we feel energized and we feel happy and healthy. And it's not fancy. It's not buckwheat this or sprouted grain, whatever that. It's just straight up pasta. But it's because how that pasta makes us feel is what informs our choices. And meals, we have a problem in our household. We eat pasta a little too often, like 2-3 times a week. But it's our happy meal. And we get really creative with all the different ways we can do it. You know, to your point around, let's just stay on the homework track for a second. Sometimes all that homework can come down to the 95 seconds someone has with a category buyer. And they have to cut through that moment. It's intense. It's potent. What do you see CPG leaders doing wrong when they have those fleeting moments with category buyers?
I would say that the homework that you're talking about is done way in advance of ever sitting in front of a buyer. So you can talk about who your target consumer is. You can talk about, and you just proved the point with your family and the gut health, and that's your target consumer. That's why you want to eat that pasta. So you then innovate around that. You cook around that. But when you have those few valuable minutes in front of a buyer, you have to know why you belong in their store, why your target consumer is their target customer in their store, and prove the point. You can tell the story of why your product matches with other products, other brands, and gives a whole buying experience, gives that chance for that grocery cart to have 30 items instead of 10 items. And then the buyer says, wait a minute, that works. Cart price will go up. You have to understand how your product tastes, how your product looks. So when you're doing category and competitive analysis, it's not just taste, taste, taste. Yes, I talk about that, and I do that all the time. But what is that product going to look like? What culinary adjectives are you going to use? What color is the font going to be? What is the pop of packaging, which is one of the big trends that we're watching this year in my Trend Watch report is pop of packaging. What is it going to look like on the shelf? How is it going to jump off? Think about the granola bar or think about the potato chip aisle. It's a C. It is bag after bag after bag after box after, and you see people reading the back of those boxes and think, what's going to make it pop off? So you do that homework before you stand in front of that buyer. I love going into buyers, and I know you have 95 seconds, but go prepared and have them taste something. So they're tasting yours versus something else. And then that is a memory on their taste buds. That's a point of differentiation in someone else's meeting. I worked for a company and we were doing a line of fresh sausages, which, yes, we won at the World Meat Olympics. We won 6 golds and 2 silvers because of the flavors, and that was great. But we went into buyers' meetings and they would bring me as the secret weapon in their back pocket. And I would have a cooler, an electric frying pan, and sausages. And I'd be doing it in the hall before we were called in. So the smell came in with us. And you know what? Huge sales. Huge sales.
So are you saying the trick is to cook bacon in the hallway?
Yeah.
That's everyone. That's the secret. You might be a snack bar company, but cook bacon in the hallway and
warm chocolate chip cookies. That works, you know.
Let's stay with Homer for a second. And I'm going to un-nerdify this a little bit, because as a trendologist, as a corporate culinary superstar that you are, I also know that you travel a lot. And one of the things that I see in CPG manufacturing are founders and food leaders that are, to be honest, they're kind of stuck. They're anchored to their bench testing. They're anchored to their desk. They're stuck on their laptops. They're stuck in meetings after meetings after meetings. But the inputs that we get, that founders get into their brains, outside of the spreadsheets and the analysis and that stuff, when they get to travel, when they get to be away from their own backyards and see other things and be around other cultures and walk into other grocery stores that are not familiar to them, we all know it fills them up. But you get to see this like perpetually, and you get to see the experiences that food leaders have when they have these experiences with you. I know you have done some tours and some travel work with food leaders. What's it been like to sort of unpack that for people to help make sure that those experiences become inputs into their work?
It's critical. It's critical. So I take a lot of groups and a lot of leaders to food shows around the world, to where the tastes and trends are happening. So if we're going to a food show in New York, we're going to spend 4 extra days, and I am going to run them through gourmet and grocery stores and little stores making one-off specialties and taste along the way, because those are memories, so that when they get back to their spreadsheets, valuable, when they get back to their bench top, they're going to say, but wait a minute, do you remember the day and we had this and then we had that and it tasted like this and it crunched like that? And that is external focus and education that can't be beat. When we go to food shows around the world, it's better, I'm sorry, than Disney World, because these people speak our language and it is empowering to be there. Now, I love going to food shows with people who have been to many and people who have never been to a food show. My first rule, they always say, oh, and I'm so excited. Wear comfy shoes. Don't eat at every booth. You just can't. You can't. If you're going past 10,000 booths, you can't eat at every booth. And so you selectively remember and take a lot of notes and where are you going back and where are you revisiting? But you will be able to identify some trends. Maybe I'll be in your ear telling you what some of them are, but you will be able to identify some trends and how they apply to your brand and your category. So you look at all these trends that are happening and take them and apply them to your brand. So you are a point of differentiation. You are ahead of the competition. It's an critical part of your homework. It really is. We're not preparing food in a bubble. We're preparing food that consumers are going to spend money for and they're going to eat. We're not making paper clips. We're making food. So what is this experiential part of it? And getting your team out there, whether it be your senior leaders, whether it be your product development team, whether it be sprinkling some marketing people in there, they all come back empowered. It is critical. Often it leads to a really great innovation or ideation session when you're back in your office/kitchens. Because you've got that external information. You're hyped up about it. You're excited about what you've seen. You can't believe what you've tasted. You have all these ideas. Then I can go in and do your innovation and ideation session, and you're going to come out with a product development pipeline that speaks to your target consumer, that speaks to your target retailer, that sets you up for 3 to 5 years in the future. Not that you want to, you can change your mind along the way. But if you have that as a plan, you know where you're going to go. You know, it also is inspiration to take people to food shows when, especially they could be a foodpreneur and they're thinking about, well, when will I get to have a booth at a food show? And that's one of the best things ever, but you can't rush that. It's like you can't rush your product development. You know that. You can't rush these things. There are steps that have to be done. And as you do them, great things happen.
So I would consider myself a retired, maybe slightly burned out agency ad man. I'm grateful for all the experiences I've had in advertising and marketing, and I leverage those experiences and some of that capability through my work now. But I wonder, are you sort of a somewhat retired or burned out private label expert? Because when I think about private label and I think about how brands feel about private label, how manufacturers feel about private label, sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're very different. When you look at private label, just like how I look at advertising campaigns, sort of evaluate them with one eye scrunched up and I'm a little bit on edge or I'm excited. But anyways, it feels like I'm still in PTSD from it. When you look at private label, what do you see? Are you excited by where private label's going on a macro level, or do you have concerns? What's your take on private label?
I am always excited about private label because they can take risks that other brands can't take. So not 100% of new launches in private label are perfect. That's just the industry we work in. But there are a lot of big wins and the whole what's possible. I love being out there and studying private label for taste, for packaging, for culinary adjectives, for tips and tricks and suggestions, for how they bring that product, that brand to life. And yes, there's gold standards. You know, to spend time in Marks and Spencer in England, to spend time at Tesco and Sainsbury. Absolutely. Invaluable. That's better than going to a university and taking a study for a year, is to spend a week in stores, you know, rent an Airbnb so you can buy all the products you want and cook them in that Airbnb before you get on that airplane to come home at the end of your time. Private label is thinking to the future, in many cases, not all, more than some of the large CPG companies. Private label should also be a really great education and inspiration for foodpreneurs. You're starting out. You think you make the world's greatest Caesar salad dressing. Good. Let's go taste a lot of them out there. Let's see what private label's doing in Caesar salad dressings or the whole dressing category. And then you're going to have an education to kickstart your food company, to kickstart where you want it to go. I think the private label will always be around.
Do you see it taking over shelf space, or do you feel like there will always be a place for branded slots and private label kind of coexisting happily together for many years?
Always be a space. Always be a space. And I say that because, you know, when we go off to food shows, whether just at the Fancy Food Show in New York recently, going to Cial in Paris in the fall, wherever we're going to experience the new and the next in food, to go to those food shows, that's not the private label food show. That's where private label comes to be inspired. That's where private label comes to see what's happening in big brands. So they do coexist and there is room for everybody.
Sometimes I feel, though, that landscape is, they're coming just to steal.
Well, of course that happens.
But maybe I'm cynical.
No, you're right. And that totally happens. And you're absolutely true. But you know what? That can happen anywhere. That can happen when you take a cookbook off a shelf and you think, wow, how did she do that? Oh, I'm going to look up those recipes. That can happen anywhere. But that's also education. We can't copyright our recipes. We can change the ingredients. But the fact that those big food shows continue to have tens of thousands of people and booths and products, that makes my heart sing. Oh, Corn, we have to go to a show together. That would be really great.
It's my happy place. You'll find this interesting. My first food show was not that long ago. It was 2022. It was Expo West. It was my first ever food show. I've been involved in and around food and was, in sort of the restaurant side of things, food service side of things many years ago when I was a wee lad. I walked into Expo West.
First of all, it's a village.
Well, it's a small country is what it feels like.
Yeah.
First off, I felt like, oh my gosh, these are my people. That was the first thought in my head. Second of all, the overwhelming smells that don't always mix well together. It filled my senses and I was invigorated by it. It was very exciting. And it sort of felt like a little bit when I was first thinking entrepreneurially when I was 19, 20 years old. I remember standing in front of the magazine rack at Indigo and looking at all these possibilities, right? All these areas, industries and craft and creative and technology and business. And I saw this as a land of opportunity. And I felt like that when I walked into Expo West. So yeah, these food shows, they're exciting. Now, food founders associate food shows with expense, with cost, with a lot of time, and sometimes with a lot of frustration if they don't hit the KPIs they're going for. But they are important. And food shows sort of sometimes are a touching point for it. But food culture seems to be shifting quite rapidly. And I think we can all call the moment that food culture shifted as a result of COVID. Everyone shopping in grocery stores more and cooking more at home. And then there was the big takeout push and food service was driving food around everywhere. And now it's resetting yet again, where some people are cooking more. I'm going to pick on a local grocery store here that was merchandising raw meat in the produce section. It still offends me. Maybe I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I apologize to listeners, but it was raw meat in styrofoam trays with plastic, and right above it was romaine lettuce in the produce section. And I went up to someone who was stocking, and she looked like a manager or someone more senior. And I said, listen, what's the deal with this? She goes, yeah, we're just experimenting with meal prep. And I said, okay, I get meal prep, but big, large, red, bloody meat by by romaine lettuce doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, that was a tangent. Consumers are shifting and changing what they're doing, what they're buying at a really rapid rate. What is it about food culture that you feel like is aligned with where the grocery store is going? Because sometimes I see a dissonance that makes me feel like no one's paying attention. Other times I feel like some retailers are getting it. What do you see? That was a really long question. Sorry about that.
It's okay. And it came with a tangent. It was okay. So I'm all for storytelling in a gourmet or grocery store. I'm all for seeing the basil and the heirloom tomatoes and a little triangle of the best Parmigiano Reggiano. And if it's a gourmet or a grocery store that also has some housewares, beautiful platters or bowls that, wow, when you buy your pasta and make it, you could put it in this bowl and you could use this Parmigiano and this basil and these tomatoes. And I love that storytelling. I wouldn't put raw meat in the produce section. But I do think that there is an opportunity that consumers know more than ever before. We know that. Consumers read more than they've ever read before about food. They listen to podcasts like this about food. They just are inundated with more things about food than ever before. So it is incumbent on a food innovator, product developer, manufacturer, and the food retailers to pay attention to what's happening out there. That's part of the homework. I'm not saying go to a food show every week. It costs money. I'm not saying get on a plane and go to different grocery stores every week. It does cost money. But you know what? Reading about what's happening and looking at what's being launched and making sure you're informed gives the retailer a chance to think, wait a second, I think I know what I should be doing right now. And they're not always 100%. Listening to people like me that talk about trends versus fads, to be able to say, well, wait a minute, if I've read or heard people in the trend space talk about how yuzu is big this year, and I've heard that 8 out of 10 times, well, maybe we should be focusing on innovating something with yuzu if we're the product developers, or getting it on our grocery shelf if we're the retailers. I do think it's an exciting time. And I agree. After COVID, there was a reset. Certainly, we started to see more chefs as brands because they couldn't have us into their restaurants. So they were launching their name on their own private label, and it was showing up on grocery shelf. That's great. That's giving consumers more tools to be able to create fantastic meals at home. And those consumers that were the chef's target consumers really gravitated toward that. We're seeing it a little bit this year come around full circle, and it's almost a new form of comfort food that's come back to be this year. There's a lot of things happening in the world, and people are maybe like you and your family. They're having their happy meal of pasta a few times a week, but other people may be thinking it's a stir fry or whatever makes them happy. So there's this comfort food. There's a number of interesting flavors that consumers are gravitating towards. A few years ago, we started to talk about spicy, sweet and spicy together. And now Dairy Queen has a spicy menu. So, it caught on fast. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying consumers accepted it and it caught on fast. So I think there is room for both in there, innovation and gourmet grocery.
Is fiber finally going to have its day? Is fiber going to be sexy? Is this what we're seeing with protein doing everything that protein's doing? Is it fiber's time?
I believe it's fiber's time with education. So making sure consumers are educated. Oh, why? Oh, that, okay. And I understand that. And how should it taste and how could it be in a product? That's where product developers and chefs of manufacturers really need to start to think about how to educate it properly. And you're right. Protein, that's not going away. It's just showing up in everything right now, from your cereal on through every other day part. It will always be there. We're seeing a big shift in consumers, what they're looking for with the whole GLP-1 and portion sizes and the need for the protein. And so we're seeing a huge shift. Is that going away? No. So that's not a trend nor a fad. That's the way of our industry and consumerism at the moment.
The marketer in me is always afraid of trying to educate and sell at the same time because it's really hard to do both. Protein has a relatively simple outcome. You consume protein and you likely build more muscle and feel stronger. Fiber is sort of a feel better, have more energy, and maybe even improve your mood. So it's not rocket science that, brands should be able to communicate the fiber play when it applies to their brand. But the education on fiber also has this, people don't want to talk about gut health too much because they know where it's going. They know the end of the line. But yet when you think about the brands, I think a great example of gut health, I think that has been communicated really well, is two brands. They're approaching a similar problem in two different ways. One is Organic Traditions. They're an ingredient supplier and blender. They have a product that is like a sachet that has 8 grams of fiber, and you add it to your water and you can increase your fiber and it tastes great. It's a wonderful product by Ali and her team. And then, of course, you have Karen over at Bloom, at her Super Belly sachet. Same kind of format, add it to water, and it improves your gut health and sort of a wellness ritual. Both those plays very similar, but yet different. And they're approaching it in a way that I feel like attaches to mood. It attaches to feelings more so than the more obvious or tangible outcomes. And I get excited about brands leaning into that because I think consumers, like you said, they're going deeper. They want to learn more, but they don't want it to come with a lot of homework. So I'm excited. That isn't really a question other than an observation. I get excited by brands that are leaning into these spaces and doing it as well as those two brands are.
So when you said, fiber is not sexy and why should we take it? I compare that to why should we take a multivitamin? We know we should. We know we should have fiber, but there's education that comes along with that. So, Bloom is a great example. It pops off the shelf. Those colors, the font for the marketer in you, and the flavor combinations, you want to buy it. And I see consumers pick it up and they put more than one in their cart because they're excited about it. Because, look at that. I'll buy the pink one and I'll buy the orange one and I'll take them home and try them. I love that. And then when they feel the results, that's great. That's fantastic. That's such a point of differentiation from many other fiber, gut health, feel good products that are out there.
And your chefing life sometimes extends over onto the consumer activation, sort of some of the event side. What are some of the projects you have coming up that really kind of pull food and culinary development into like the consumer life and food culture?
Absolutely. So on one side of my desk, I am really honored to be the chair of the board of Food Day Canada. And Food Day Canada was started by Anita Stewart, Canada's Food Laureate, who was a visionary and an incredible human being far ahead of her time, who really wanted to celebrate, to shop, to cook, to dine, and celebrate Canadian ingredients and Canadian food. And now more than ever, imagine that's exactly what we do so often. Is it from Canada? Where does this come from? And you see people, I'm going to buy this blueberry because it's from BC. I'm not buying it if it's not right now. And I love that. So being part of Food Day gets me to talk about Canadian foods, Canadian producers, Canadian farmers, Canadian food storytellers. We just had the Good Food Innovation Awards from Food Day Canada to really celebrate people across the country. But August 1st, every year is Food Day Canada, coast to coast to coast. And so it's an opportunity for restaurateurs, for manufacturers, for consumers. When you make your pasta sauce on August 1st, make sure you buy tomatoes that are local, and then you're supporting a Canadian farmer and eating Canadian ingredients. So that's on August 1st. And on July 28th, my goodness, Food Day Canada hosts the world's longest barbecue in Elora, Ontario, just west of Toronto. If anybody is listening from out there, come and visit. Last year we had 12,000 people show up for this barbecue, and we'll have more this year. Chefs and wineries and breweries and a lot of barbecuing and a lot of farmers, and fantastic event. And I love the fact that that many consumers come to Elora on a Tuesday and celebrate. And you know what? That makes my heart happy. That means consumers want to have something fabulous and make a food memory. And so that part of my chefy life, I love being able to do things like that. And we talked about culinary tours, and I do that certainly for consumers as well. I'm leading a great food and art tour through Paris in the fall, and a couple of them next spring. I'm doing a barbecue tour next spring with a lot of barbecue chefs all through the Austin region. And so that just makes me happy. I get to talk to consumers. I get to eat with consumers. I get to show them behind the kitchen door tours. Honestly, it couldn't be better.
Living the dream.
You can come anytime you want.
I love it. Okay, final question for you. Favorite grocery shopping experience anywhere in the world? Where was it?
2. Decades ago, I was in Austin visiting the first Whole Foods head office, Whole Foods #1 store. And I'm walking through and I'm thinking, this is just going to be like any other grocery store. Oh no, you get close to the seafood counter and there's this little seafood bar and there's a gentleman there and he's frying fish and there's a little counter and he pours a glass of wine and says, sit at the counter, and he hands me a little bit of fish and I have a sip of wine and my shopping cart's beside me. And I think, wow, this is great. And at the back of the store, I see this smoke billowing up and I push my cart over there and it's a smoker and there's a pit master and he's taking the brisket out and he's carving it and he hands me a beer from a local craft brewery and I have some of the brisket and I think, this is incredible. And I'm picking up more things along the way. And you know, there's chocolate fountains and there's pastry chefs talking about the little tarts and where the lemons came from. And that changed my thought on how we communicate to people who walk in a grocery store. It's not just running in and picking up a lemon and running out. And yes, we all have to do that some days, but it's the experience and you have them in your store and how can you engage them and how can you teach them and how can you put a flavor in their mouth and they will come back to you.
Like a grocery theme store, like a theme park.
Well, yeah. And, you know, there has been throughout the years when we talk about restaurants inside a grocery store. So, you know, you go to Kroger and that can happen and there'll be a little restaurant inside. But that's amazing because you're there because you are grocery shopping. You're there because you're picking up food. So if you're featuring things and flavors and tastes on your menu in your grocerant, in your grocery store, consumers are then going to go and buy it. It's like when we started to have a lot of grocery stores feature cooking schools. It's a captive audience. You're there to learn how to cook, and then you're all going to walk downstairs and you're going to buy all those ingredients that you just cooked upstairs and ate. But grocery stores are my happy place. I just adore it. And you're right. Wherever I am around the globe, I am in a farmer's market. I am in a grocery store. I am in a gourmet store. I am watching what people and the cultures of those cities and those countries eat. And that helps me with any of the projects I'm working on for my clients because I'm taking all that information in and we can pick the best and make it be in their products.
I love it. Well, there used to be a diner in the Zellers that we would go to as kids. That wasn't the same, though. That was pretty tragic anyway. Christine, I'm so glad we got a chance to hit record and to share everything, especially with the events coming up. Glad to do this. Thank you for joining me on Shelf Space.
You're most welcome. And all of those events, you know, people just reach out because I love to talk about food.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Shelf Space. If you like what you hear, I would be eternally grateful for a 5-star rating and a quick share on social. Your support means the world to me and our partners, TD, Fasken, Rima, Pacific Coast Distribution, Picnic Creative, and Benchmark 60. For bonus content and resources from our sponsors, go to shelfspacepodcast.com. I'm Corbin Hebert. I'm glad we're on this rocket ship together. I'll see you in the future.